Mary. We are reading the book of Esther. This will be chapters 1 through 5. And I am reading out of the Interlinear Bible, which is the Hebrew and the Aramaic translation of the Old Testament. So thank you for joining me today for this reading. Chapter 1 of the book of Esther. And it happened in the days of Ahasuerus. He is who reigned from India even to Ethiopia over 127 provinces. In those days, when King Ahasuerus sat on the throne of his kingdom in Shushan, the palace, in the 3rd year of his reign, he made a banquet for all his princes and his servants. The power of Persia and Media, the nobles and the princes of the provinces, were before him, when he made known the riches of his glorious kingdom and the honor of his excellent greatness many days, even 180 days. And when these days were fulfilled, the king made a banquet for all the peoples who were found in Shushan, the palace, both to great and to small, for 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. There was overlaying with white linen and violet, and cords of fine linen and pillars of white marble. The couches were of gold and silver on a red and white and pearl and black marble pavement. And they gave out drink in vessels of gold, the vessels differing from one another, and royal wine in abundance, according to the hand of the king. And the drinking was according to the law, no one compelling. For so the king had ordered every chief of his house, that they should do according to every man's pleasure. Also Vashti, the queen, made a banquet for the women in the royal house which King Ahasuerus owned. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was feeling good with wine, he said to Mehuman, Biztha, Harbana, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcas, the 7 eunuchs, serving before the face of Ahasuerus, the king, to bring Vashti the queen before the king with the royal crown, in order to make known to the people and the princes her beauty, for she was beautiful to look upon. But Vashti the queen refused to come at the king's command by his eunuchs. And the king was very angry, and his fury burned within him. And the king said to the wise men who knew the times, for so was the king's manner toward all who knew law and judgment, and ones next to him were Karshena, Shethar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marcina, and Memecan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who saw the king's face, who sat first in the kingdom. What shall be done with the queen, because she has not done the command of the king Ahasuerus by the eunuchs? And Memecan answered before the king and princes, Vashti the queen has not only done wrong to the king, but also to all the princes, and to all the people who are in all the provinces of Ahasuerus the king. For the matter of the queen shall go out to all women, to make their husbands despised in their eyes, in their reporting that King Ahasuerus said to bring in Vashti the queen before him, but she did not come. And this day the princes of Persia and Media, who have heard the queen's word, shall say the same to all the king's princes, and there shall be contempt and strife. If it please the king, let there be a royal decree from him, and let it be written among the laws of Persia and Media, so that it shall not pass away, that Vashti come no more before the king Ahasuerus. And let the king give her royal estate to a neighbor who is better than she is. And when the king's decree, which he shall make, shall be throughout all his empire, for it is great, all the wives shall give their husbands honor, both the small and the great. And the saying pleased the king and the princes. And the king did according to the word of Memecan. And he sent letters into all the king's provinces, into every province according to its writing, and to people and peoples, according to language, so that every man should be ruling in his house and speaking according to the language of his people. Chapter 2 of Esther. After these things, when King Ahasuerus' wrath had calmed down, he remembered Vashti and what she had done, and what he decreed against her. And the king's servants who served him said, Let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king, and let the king choose officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, so that they may gather together every beautiful young virgin to Shushan the palace, to the house of the women, to the hand of Haggai, the king's eunuch, keeper of the women, to give their purifications. And let the young women who please the king rule instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so. In Shushan, the palace, there was a certain Jew. His name was Mordecai, the son of Jar, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity, which had been led away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had exiled. And he was rearing Hadassah. She is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had no father nor mother. And the young woman was fair of appearance and beautiful of form. And at the death of her father and mother, Mordecai took her for his daughter. And it happened when the king's command and his order was heard, and when many young women had been gathered to Shushan the palace, into the hand of Haggai, Esther was taken into the king's house, into the hand of Haggai, keeper of the women. And the young woman was good in his eyes, and she rose in favor before him. And he hastened her purifiers and her portions to give them to her. And 7 young women were seen to be given to her out of the king's house. And he moved her and her maids to the best place in the house of the women. Esther had not revealed her people or her kindred, for Mordecai had commanded her that she should not reveal it. And Mordecai walked to and fro every day in front of the court of the women's house in order to know Esther's welfare and what would be done with her. And when the turn of each young woman had come to go into King Ahasuerus, at the end of her being purified 12 months according to the law of the women, for so were fulfilled the days of their cleansings, 6 months with oil and myrrh, and 6 months with fragrances and perfumes of the women. And in this way the young woman goes in to the king. All she says is given to her to go with her out of the house of the women to the king's house. She goes in the evening, and on the morning she returns to the second house of the women, into the hand of Shaashgaz, the king's eunuch, who kept the concubines. She does not come in to the king any more unless the king delights in her, and she is called by name. And when the turn of Esther had come, she, being the daughter of Abihail, Mordecai's uncle, whom he had taken to himself for his daughter, to go, Haggai, the king's eunuch, the keeper of the women, said, and Esther had favor in the sight of all who looked on her. And Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal house in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she rose in grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins. He set the royal crown on her head and made her to rule instead of Vashti. And the king made a great banquet for all his princes and his servants, Esther's banquet, as he ordered a rest for the provinces and gave gifts according to the state of the king. And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Esther had not revealed her kindred or her people, as Mordecai had commanded her, for Esther obeyed Mordecai's command, as she did when she was reared by him. In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, 2 of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, of those who guarded the threshold, were angry, and sought to stretch out a hand against King Ahasuerus. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it to Esther the queen. And Esther told the king in the name. And when the matter was searched into, it was found out, and the 2 were hanged on a tree. And it was written in the book of the matters of the days before the king. Chapter 3 of Esther. After these things, King Ahasuerus enlarged Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, or Agagite, and raised him, and set his feet above all the princes with him. And all the king's servants who were in the king's gate were bowing and worshipping Haman, for the king had so commanded for him. But Mordecai did not bow nor worship. And the king's servants who were at the gate of the king said to Mordecai, "Why do you disobey the king's command?" And it happened when they spoke daily to him, and he did not listen to them, they told Haman to see if Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow nor worship him, then Haman was filled with fury. And it was light in his eyes to reach forth a hand against Mordecai alone, for they had revealed to him Mordecai's people. And Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were in all the kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. In the first month, it is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of the king Ahasuerus, they made fall pur, that is, the lot before Haman day by day, and from month to month to the 12th month, that is, the month Adar. And Haman said to King Ahasuerus, "There is a people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom, and their laws are different from every people, and they are not doing the king's laws. And it is not for the king's gain to let them alone. If it pleases the king, let it be written to destroy them. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the hands of those who do the work, to bring it into the king's treasuries." And the king took his ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the Jews' vexer. And the king said to Haman, "The silver is given to you, also the people to do with them as seems good to you." Then the king's scribes were called on the 13th day of the first month, and it was written according to all that Haman had commanded to the king's satraps, and to the governors who were over every province, and to the rulers of every people of every province, according to its writings, and to every people according to their language. It was written in the name of King Ahasuerus, and sealed with the king's ring. And documents were sent by the runners into all the king's provinces to destroy, to kill, and to cause to perish all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, in one day, on the 13th or the 12th month, on the 13th of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, and to take what they owned for a prize. A copy of the writing to be given as law in every province was published to all people, to be ready for that day. The runners went out, but hurried by the king's word, and the decree was given in Shushan. And Haman sat down to drink, but the city chapter 4 of Esther. And Mordecai understood all that was done. And Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes, and went out into the middle of the city and cried with a loud and bitter cry. And he came before the king's gate, for there was no entering into the king's gate clothed with sackcloth. And in every province, wherever the king's word and his decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews, and fasting and weeping and wailing. Sackcloth and ash were spread on many. And Esther's maids and her eunuchs came and told her. And the queen was exceedingly wretched, in pain. And she sent clothing to clothe Mordecai, and to take away his sackcloth from him. But he did not accept. And Esther called for Hatak of the king's eunuchs, who was made to stand before her, and she charged him as to Mordecai to know what this was, and why this was. And Hatak went out to Mordecai to the city street in front of the king's gate. And Mordecai told him of all that had happened to him, and of the sum of the silver which Haman had said to weigh into the king's treasuries for the Jews in order to destroy them. Also he gave him a copy of the writing of the law which was given at Shushan in order to destroy them, to show it to Esther, and to reveal to her, and to command her that she should go in to the king to make supplication to him, and to seek from him help. And Hatak came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Spoke to Hatak and ordered him to go to Mordecai. For all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that whoever, whether man or woman, shall come to the king into the inner court, who is not called, there is one law of his execution, except such to whom the king shall hold out the golden scepter, so that he may live. But I have not been called to come into the king these 30 days. But they told Mordecai Esther's words, and Mordecai said to take back to Esther, do not imagine within yourself to deliver yourself in the king's house more than all the Jews. If you are completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance shall rise up to the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house shall perish. And who knows if you have attained to the kingdom for such a time as this? And Esther said to take back to Mordecai, go gather together all the Jews being found in Shushan, and fast for me, and do not eat or drink 3 days, night or day. My maidens and I will also fast in the same way, and so I will go into the king, which is not according to the law. And if I have perished, I have perished. And Mordecai passed over and did according to all that Esther had commanded him. Esther chapter 5. And it happened on the 3rd day that Esther put on royal clothing and stood in the inner before the king's inner house. And the king was sitting on his royal throne in the royal house in front of the gate of the house. And it happened when the king saw Esther the queen standing in the court, she rose in favor in his eyes. And the king held out the golden scepter that was in his hand to Esther. And Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. And the king said to her, what shall be done to you, O Queen Esther? And what is your wish? It will be given to you also, even to half the kingdom. And Esther answered, if it seems good to the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet which I have prepared for him. And the king said, cause Haman to hurry to do the word of Esther. And the king and Haman came to the banquet which Esther had prepared. And the king said to Esther at the banquet of wine, what is your petition? And it shall be granted to you. And what is your wish? And it will be done to half of the kingdom. And Esther replied and said, as to my petition and my request, if I have found favor in the eyes of the king, and it pleases the king to grant my petition and to perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet which I shall prepare for them, and I will do tomorrow according to the word of the king. And Haman went out that day joyful and with a feeling good. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he did not understand up or move for him, he was full of fury against Mordecai. But Haman held himself in and came to his house, and sent for and brought in his friends and his wife Zeresh. And Haman told them of the glory of his riches and his many sons, and all to which the king had promoted him, and how he lifted up above the princes and the servants of the king. And Haman said also, Esther the queen did not let anyone come in with the king to the banquet that she had prepared except me. And also tomorrow I am called to it with the king. Yet all this is no gain to me as long as I am seeing Mordecai, the Jew, sitting at the king's gate. And his wife, Zeresh, said to him and all his friends, make a wooden gallows 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak to the king, and let them hang Mordecai on it, and go in with the king to the banquet, rejoicing. And the thing was good in Haman's eyes, and he caused the wooden gallows to be made.